Ladies and Germans, welcome back to our Cyka to Stalin series. If this is your first time joining me, this is where I'm on a quest to get my Soviet play in Company of Heroes 2 up to below rank 100 style, so best 100 people in the world at Soviets. It's a tall order, but I think I'm up to the task. In this series, I go over my own replays and those of high-ranking players to dissect their Soviet gameplay and try and inject it into my own, and then each week you can come back and see how my play has improved and find out where the learnings have worked, where they need some improvement, and hopefully integrate it into your own game as well. So where do we leave off last week before we leap into the action this week? We were looking at a series of Von Ivans replays from the seasonal map cup, and I was noticing how he constantly keeps his forces decentralized, split up, and spread out over the map. He puts a huge emphasis on capping and keeping his units in green cover ready to receive the enemy, so that when they try and recapture that territory, it's extremely costly to them. So we're looking at some of my games today, some successful ones, one unsuccessful one, to see how this works in practice with a lower ranked player like myself and see what we can learn for next week. So in this match, I did my full conscript opening that I showcased in previous episodes, and ostensibly it doesn't look like it's going that well. I've forced off his Sturm Pioneer, giving them 2 losses, which is not too bad, but I've taken heavy losses in my conscripts and accidentally retreat my engineers here. I've got one healthy squad of conscripts to take on Volksgrenadiers and a Kerberwagen. I'm not going to take that fight because it'd be just a waste of manpower, so I hop in the house where any fight I do take, I'll be trading extremely efficiently. But where we need to look here is the mini-map. During that entire time, I had one squad of conscripts running around and I captured nearly the entire other side of the map. And just by trading kind of semi-efficiently here and holding his attention, I was able to put myself in a position where I've got the majority of the map. There's 2 strategic points that he hasn't even had time to capture yet. And yes, he's got my fuel and 2 VPs, but he's losing the resource war enormously at this point. And you can see one of my conscripts that captured the whole other side of the map is now even going to threaten his cutoff. So I then transitioned into guards and conscripts with PPSHs, and because I've captured all the other side of the map, he can't bring his whole force to bear on me, and I'm able to have a really efficient fight here where with the aid of the machine gun, the guards are just able to force off with the conscript and the engineers the bulk of his forces, and instantly I'm able to respond and start recapturing the left side of the map with the right side now firmly under my control. I then get the T-70 out, with the idea of using that to hit his infantry and take advantage of the resource boost that I've taken early game, and I've got a machine gun as well, which I'm hoping to use to lock down one side of the map so I can orchestrate fights on the other and use that to slow him down and hold my sort of safe natural fuel, which is the one closest to me. And just keep an eye on the minimap throughout all of these games for this episode, because you'll see, even when he manages to push me off, I'm usually holding more strategic points, and 2 strategic points is basically worth 1 fuel point. And even if he does manage to get his fuel back, I'm usually either capping my fuel off of him, or I have control of both of them. And what the result of this is, I get a KV-1 out before he's got any chance to respond to that, and I have my T-70 still alive. And so even though he's kind of swung back as his infantry have gained veterancy and I made some sloppy mistakes losing my infantry, he's just got no response to this. And my T-70 here is able to flank both of his Raketwerfer and basically get rid of his whole ability to deal with the very strong armoured push I've got at the moment. And just a side note here is always make sure, if you've got AT emplacements like that, that one is covering the other, because if they're too close together, then both of them can get flanked at once and you can lose them like that. So up against another OKW in the next game on Kolodny Firma, and I wanted to just look at the TAC map entirely for this match, because I didn't play particularly well with my infantry play, but I was fairly responsible with my capping, and I just wanted to kind of look at the TAC map throughout the course of the game and see what that focus on capping can do to your enemy, even if you're not necessarily beating him straight out on the infantry engagement or playing that well yourself. So we see here I've managed to take roughly half the map off of him, and we traded relatively evenly. But here he's having to he brings all of his forces down to the bottom after I force his Sternpires up off the top. And although he's forced me off there, I'm capturing his fuel and he is yet to capture mine. So I'm getting the resource advantage there. So even though it's kind of messy and icky and we're both losing territory, I've got fuel connected to my side longer than he has. And we skip ahead a little bit more here. I've taken my fuel back, forced him off, and I'm starting to decap his here and threaten that. So it is uncaptured, and again, I'm just, every second that you can keep that fuel coming in where he hasn't got it, you're creating an advantage for yourself. And as long as you're not too sloppy and lose too much in the way of your infantry, that adds up to the point where eventually you're not going to have these kind of back and forth fights. It's going to be that you've managed to use the fuel to get yourself some sort of an advantageous unit and you can just steamroll them off the map. And that sort of came in the shape of my T70 in this game, which just allowed me to swing the infantry fights, deal with his looks, and then, because I was winning consistently the fights, I could just have like the one squad of conscripts in the south here, which is just capped the entire south of the map and even taken the very closest strategic point to his base. And if you think about that, although I had to retreat that conscript squad immediately, the time it's going to take for his infantry squads to go and not only cap that but decap it and then bring it back into his favour is just giving me a huge economic advantage, and meaning that, you know, if he wants to stand a chance in the long game, he's never going to be able to fight me with his full force at once. So this was like an extremely sloppy game. I had an IS-2 out which I lost in the mid-game, and that was, I suppose, another example of how far ahead I was in resources just purely by capping. But those resources just allowed me, despite my sloppiness, just to completely overwhelm him. And by the end of it, all the stuff I was taking on the map, I was keeping. And I was able to just equalise in that way. You'll see he got more kills, more damage than me, but I still managed to win the match. So we're now at the Minsk pocket, again against an OKW. I didn't intend for this to be like an OKW clinic, but that was just all the players that I was coming up against, and the most interesting games. So that's kind of why we're at here. And again, you can see I've gone for my 4 conscript opening, and I've spread out across the map and just got a fairly reliable cap. And you'll see I looked at this initial engagement because it kind of shows how, with proper micro on your conscripts, you can, even though I trade really, really closely here, I only just knock his Volksgrens out. I have 2 guys left, so I can cap the middle VP, and that's all time that he's going to have to spend on capping that. And in the meantime, I managed to lock down the 1 Volks for the 1 conscript squad, and my other 2 conscript squads could beat off his Stern Pioneer, and that was a huge win. And now if you look at the mini-map, I'm able to cap right the way up to his VPs, take strategic points off. And I think this was a good example of kind of not necessarily winning a fight, but making it very expensive for him to cap. I just had my 1 squad of engineers and a depleted squad of conscripts, but by having the engineers in ambush position and keeping the conscripts in green cover, they were able to fend off that attack and just make it too costly for him to push onwards. And I did the same thing with the conscripts on the left there. So the Su-76 came out. I decided to get that instead of the T-70. Obviously I haven't been able to threaten his fuel this game at all because it's really difficult to do that on Minsk pocket. So I suppose I wanted to have something that was a response to vehicles, although against the looks I feel like a T-70 well microed will pretty much do the job in killing it. But also I took the Su-76 because I could use it with an attack ground command to just constantly harass the battle group headquarters that he'd built further forward, and that put him under pressure, which caused, I think, his looks to dive, and then that mine that I planted on my flank he hit, and that caused him a huge amount of problems, of course, because now the looks, which is very fast, suddenly becomes easy shooting for the Su-76, which then knocks it out there. And following up from that, I'm able to, with that neutralised, start hitting his infantry, drop an incendiary strike on that position, and then resume the shelling with the Su-76 while the T-70 moves in here. And this is just costing gallons of manpower. And the T-70 here, because there was only 1 soldier in the Sternpire squad with the Panzerschreck, sorry, it was able to just sit there and wipe out models all day long without actually being in any threat. And I basically have cornered him around this forward operating base that he's created over his fuel, where he's constantly having to protect that or do something about the Su-76, which was attacking it. He tries to bring out a Puma, and again, because he's under so much pressure here, he just dives and nearly knocks out the T-70, but loses the Puma. And I mean, that's really the nail in the coffin there. And again, I've got the majority of the map. I'm constantly looking at the mini-map, threatening his VP, making sure my VP is recaptured, and through, I suppose, all the fuel advantage that I was getting, and also having more manpower because I was trading efficiently, I was able to bring out a T-34 to augment my Su-76 and T-70, and that came out just in time to knock out his Schwerpanzer headquarters before they were even built. And, you know, he kind of threw in the towel at that point because there just really wasn't a chance of him coming back. So now moving on to the final game featuring me today, which was again on Arnhem Checkpoint against OKW, which is like a mirror of the one I lost in the last episode. But this one, I want to take a bit of a longer look at it because it was less straightforward why I lost it, and I think I can take the most learning from this one. And I think generally what it came down to is that the whole kind of spreading out and capping everything and overwhelming him, it only works if, you know, you've got the kind of higher actions per minute than him. You're able to focus, and when you are taking those engagements while you're capping on the sides of the map, you're actually trading efficiently, and he just didn't let me trade efficiently. He out-microed me here. And you can see here one instance where I tried to fight his Volks in that church, and, you know, he nearly had an entire squad of conscripts there, whilst the other one, sitting in green cover, wasn't able to do much until they got their Molotovs. However, they were then themselves, I think I killed that Volk squad, or forced it to retreat. But again, they were sort of bled out by the other Volk squad. So he had basically a squad and a half there for one of his squads. He then made a bit of a mistake here in the centre, where he brought two fresh squads in, and through using green cover and him being out in the red there, and the use of the building as well, I was able to force off those two squads. So that was kind of a better trade for me, and meant that he couldn't capture the point. And you can see, because I forced off those squads, look at the mini-map again, I'm able to re-secure my fuel and threaten his flanks a little bit. But again, I mis-microed here, just covering that open ground when the enemy's already in position with some cover and you've got no cover. I mean, it's almost not worth taking the fight at that point, because you can see he just forced me off there easily. And the same thing there happened to his Sturmpioneer. You know, they ran at my conscripts and they lost models, and, you know, when because they're a small unit and an expensive unit, when they lose models, it's a real pain in the arse. So they're able to be forced off there. So I go into my T3. Not bad timing for that at all. I've managed to control my fuel for a fair portion of the game, and I've managed to threaten his a little bit, but not nearly as much as I did in the other games. So I get the T-70 out because I was struggling against his infantry, and I sort of felt like he wasn't going to have so much of a fuel advantage on me that I had to worry and get an Su-76 out. So I made fairly good use of the T-70. Though, even though I was in kind of ascendancy at this point, because I got my T-70 and he didn't have a very good answer to it, he still kept running around my backlines and capping with Volksgrenadier, and just being a nuisance, meaning that I couldn't ever concentrate my infantry or put them into defensive positions in the way that I would have liked to. And I suppose what that means is that even though he was kind of suffering, it wasn't a long-term advantage for me, really. And here I just make stupid decisions. I had a MG that was doing really nice work in his house, locking down this side of the map, and I just got overconfident with it, and you know, didn't retreat it soon enough. I mean, an MG against 3 squads, especially if they're all attacked from different angles, you're basically just asking it to get killed if you don't move it fairly quickly. And I also mis-microed the T-70 and put it in a position where it could be shot by the Rakettenwerfer afterwards. And then you'll see I just kind of piecemeal run in. Like, I've got one conscript squad there fighting against 2 squads, and then I bring in a second squad, but now they're fighting against 3. So I suppose I was on tilt at this point. I've lost my MG, I've lost my T-70, wasn't thinking very clearly, and was just taking fights at a really disadvantageous time, and again lose a vetted conscript squad in the middle here, after responding with the Su-76, because of course I was worried about him getting out some sort of you know, armoured threat to me here. And he didn't, and so that proved to be an annoying sort of happenstance. So obviously I read kind of the flow of the game a bit wrong there too. So I get out a T-34 because I figure that combined, it's obviously not the best for anti-tank, but combined with the Su-76, it's nice, and obviously it will help me deal with the Obersoldaten and other powerful infantry that he's got out there. And you'll see they managed to wipe one of my shock squads. I'm still working out the micro for shock squads, and I'm experimenting with them. One thing I know is don't leave them defending. They need to run in from somewhere where they're not expected to do maximum damage. So here was another kind of key engagement where he blobbed a whole load into the centre there, and I kind of stupidly left my T-34 sitting there, and although it got some kills, it ate a load of Raketenwerfer rounds and Panzerschreck rounds right to the face and put it on really low health, meaning it couldn't contribute later into the fight. And you know, because I'd lost 2 machine guns by this point in the game, that huge blob was just something I couldn't really have an answer to. And of course that T-34 was so damaged that though he didn't kill it, it was effectively dead for the next 2 minutes while it's being repaired. And during that time he can use it to cap, he can use it to consolidate his position, lay mines, get infantry into green cover so that when I do get back out on the map, he's waiting in the most advantageous positions, he's going to trade really well. And of course I made another pretty horrific mistake there, sitting my conscript squads in a building next to a Panther and Sturmpires, and they got wiped out there. And that was just one thing, the more things were happening, the more sloppy mistakes, so the bigger my army got, the more sloppy mistakes I was making. Like there, I lost the Su-76 by parading it around in front of a house full of, with a Panzerschreck in it, and here he was just able to kind of use the vastly superior frontal armour of the Panther to get in front there and really unfortunately knock out the gun on my T-34. But this is a clever engagement from him really, because although it looked like a kind of 3-on-1 situation, the Panther's way better than the T-34, and also he was fighting in front of a house with a Panzerschreck and a Raketenwerfer. So if I ever tried to dive or chase him, then you know, I was instantly going to be punished in a really big way for that. So here comes the Katusha, which I bought out kind of in response. I saw, you know, he had the highly vetted Volksgrens and the Obersoldaten, and I thought, okay, I can use the Katusha to kind of bleed manpower on that, especially because I've got the 2 T-34s. If I use them together, I can take out the Panther. Now, operative word there, use them together. I had one go off on its own here, while the other one was kind of hanging out on the other flank for no particular reason, and it just got knocked out predictably by the Panther and the Sturmpires. And again, kind of a, you know, lousy engagement here, because I let the Obersoldaten run up on my shock squads, lost one of the squads, and, you know, shocks work best from surprise when they can get in behind the enemy and be unexpected and use their grenades and that sort of stuff, and you know that was just really inefficient. And again, the T-34 there inevitably dies to the Panther because its mate had been picked off on its own previously as well, and I had the AT gun out of position there as well. And it's like deja vu to the last episode. He gets out a Königstiger, and I've got a... Luckily this time I actually have got an Su-85 to deal with it, but it's sort of instantly flanked by the Panther, which then goes on to kill the Katusha, and it's just kind of game over really at this point. So I think the thing that was really the issue with me in that game was that in the early game I didn't get as much of a victory out as I wanted to, because his infantry micro was at least on par, if not better than mine. And later on in the game, I had a bigger army to worry about. I was under pressure on multiple fronts, and he was just able to exploit that and kind of outplay me to the point where I was losing squads and making kind of poor decisions. So on to the final replay. It was given to me by a lovely Dane called Jakob, who I got talking to over on Reddit, where he goes by the name Tordenskjold. And he's kind of a sub 200 rank player as Soviets, and it's just a nice... sort of contrast with me, where you can see in his conscript micro he really squeezes every inch of value out of them, knows exactly when to retreat them, and uses green cover very well, to the point where he's able to you know, turn what would otherwise be disadvantageous fights in his favour and hold parts of the map. allowing him to get the capping in. And he was also telling me the importance of sort of key points on the map where on this map, for example, it's the OKW's cut-off for this one, but if you hold it, not only does it cut off their fuel, but also all of their units have to retreat past there, so you can actually, what he said, make them pay a blood tax every time they retreat a unit that you're going to probably knock off an extra model or even potentially get a wipe. So in this replay he was able to use that to quite good advantage. And here, we just sort of skipping along, you can see he's got really good map control. He's holding on to all three of the VPs, and he was only pushed back slightly when the flak half-track came out, but he's got a really good response to that, in that he's got his Ziz gun out and a T-70. And pretty much for the rest of the game now, he's always constantly got the OKW on the back foot. And he does make a pretty annoying mistake here, where he sort of greedily stayed looking for the kill on the flak half track, but gets killed by a Rakettenwerfer. But you can see by positioning a infantry squad on that cut-off point with the PPSHs, he's able to get a wipe there. And just using the economic advantage that he got through having superior capping here, he is able to get out a KV-1 and use that to pretty quickly knock out the flak half track here. And it just shows that, you know, when you've got better unit preservation than I have, and you kind of micro well and keep the capping up, this is what you can expect to achieve at the higher ranks with good Soviet play. So looking at this kind of how he's ended up here, he's got a big advantage with the KV-1 and a lot of vet infantry left over, 2 cons, he's got his guard squad, got a machine gun. So he's got a really good answer to everything that the OKW can throw out at this point. And although, you know, the OKW's got lots of vet on his Volksgrens and Fallschirmjäger and the anti-tank to deal with it, it's just very difficult for him to come back in that situation, because not only has he got to beat Jakob's forces, but he's also got to then recapture the map, and the whole time he's not recapturing the map, focusing on beating the forces, Jakob's got enough resources to just constantly come back at him again and again and again. Also in that replay, he did an interesting build order where he went 3 conscripts and a second engineer to start off with, and then went straight into tier 2 and got a machine gun out. So I think I might have to experiment with that for the next episode as well, so look out for that. So that's the end of Cyka to Stalin, episode 4, and I think what the next episode has really got to be, I can't see any glaring holes in my play at the moment, other than just transitioning into the late game better in terms of keeping an eye on my units, using the tactical map more, and keeping those units alive, and then also setting up some better kind of set piece plays in the end game to really leverage my force composition to the best of its ability to take out, you know, whatever advantage he's got against me. So as kind of a recap on what we've looked at in this session, I'd say the main thing to take away is that capping is really good. You know, if you can stretch your forces a little bit thin or micro them well against him to buy yourself some time, or buy one of your units the ability to hair off and go and cap parts of the map, that can buy you an enormous advantage, particularly in the early game, where it'll set you up well to come back and have some really decisive victories in the late game. So that's all from me and Cyka to Stalin for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you're enjoying it, please support the channel, help us grow. Drop a like and a subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your family, or not. But otherwise, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.